where every story unfolds with intensity and unforgettable moments. John Cena enters a luxurious restaurant in the heart of the city, dressed in simple, wrinkled clothes as if he had just come from an ordinary day. He chooses a discreet table, trying to go unnoticed, while the glow of crystal chandeliers illuminates the space around him. But before he even gets the chance to place his order, a waitress approaches with a look of disdain and an arrogant posture. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she snaps, her tone laced with irony, loud enough for other patrons to hear. What happens next not only leaves everyone in the restaurant stunned, but reveals a truth that changes everything. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. we have another special story for you. The Lumiere restaurant was a symbol of sophistication in Beverly Hills, located on one of the city's most prestigious avenues. Its wide windows offered a view of streets illuminated by luxurious neon signs and slow-moving sports cars. Inside, every detail was carefully curated to impress. Lumiere wasn't just a restaurant, it was a destination for those who wanted to be seen and admired. Ashley, one of Lumiere's most experienced waitresses, moved confidently through the dining room wearing a rehearsed smile. Her immaculate bun and tailored uniform reinforced her image of efficiency and control. Working there wasn't just a job, it was a privilege. At least, that's how Ashley saw it. Being a waitress at one of Beverly Hills' most renowned restaurants was something she mentioned with pride whenever she had the chance. But Ashley had another side, a side marked by exaggerated pride that often spilled over into arrogance. She had a peculiar talent for quickly judging patrons, mentally categorizing them based on their clothing, demeanor, and appearance. Some people, she thought, just didn't belong here. The restaurant's glass door swung open smoothly, and a man walked in. He wore worn-out jeans, a simple shirt, and a jacket that looked comfortable but lacked any hint of luxury branding. His presence was understated, almost invisible, as he calmly made his way to the reception desk. John Cena wasn't a man who enjoyed flaunting his wealth, despite being one of Hollywood's most well-known stars. His reserved demeanor stood in stark contrast to the extravagant sparkle of Beverly Hills, and at that moment he seemed like just another ordinary customer. Ashley was busy at the reception desk discussing a VIP reservation with another staff member when she noticed Cena. She abruptly stopped talking, her gaze narrowing as she assessed him with barely concealed disdain. He didn't look anything like the typical Lumiere clientele. Without hiding her reaction, she tilted her head and gave him a slow once-over, her eyes lingering on his scuffed boots. "Good evening," she said in a dry tone, forcing a smile that disappeared almost instantly. "How can I help you?" "I'd like a table, please," Cena said, his tone polite and calm. Ashley raised an eyebrow as if she had just heard something absurd. Her expression seemed to ask, "How dare he?" She crossed her arms, her smile vanishing entirely. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a very exclusive restaurant," she said, her words dripping with condescension. Cena continued to smile, unfazed. "Yes, this is the place," he replied calmly. Ashley let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking her head. "Okay, just a moment. I need to check something." She turned quickly, not bothering to maintain any semblance of politeness, and walked off toward the back of the restaurant. As she disappeared from view, Cena remained seated, his demeanor unchanged. Despite the obvious judgment, he maintained his quiet composure. It was a subtle reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in the face of arrogance and judgment is to simply remain calm, and in doing so, let your presence speak for itself. The room around him buzzed with hushed whispers. Some patrons exchanged glances, curious about the interaction. Others stared openly at the man in worn clothes, who seemed unfazed by the waitress's condescending attitude. There was something about Cena's calmness, something almost magnetic, that made the entire room take notice. When Ashley returned, her smile was forced and her posture was stiff. "Follow me," she said curtly, still clearly uncomfortable. As Cena stood up to follow her, the room seemed to quiet even further. It was as if the entire restaurant had collectively taken a breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Ashley led him to a table at the far corner, away from the prime seating areas, making sure it was as discreet as possible. She set the menu in front of him without a word, and for a brief moment, Cena caught her eye. There was no arrogance in his gaze, no judgment, only a quiet acknowledgement that this was just another moment, just another encounter. What had started with disdain was now teetering on the edge of something else. Would Ashley continue her path of arrogance, or would she realize the opportunity for growth in this simple encounter? In a world where judgments were often made based on appearances, John Cena's presence reminded everyone in the room of something crucial, that sometimes it's not about where you come from, what you wear, or what others think of you. It's about how you carry yourself and the quiet strength that often lies beneath the surface. And so, while the other patrons watched, many still unsure of what to make of the situation, it was clear that the man in the simple clothes had already won the moment. It wasn't by confronting anyone or reacting to the judgment. It was simply by being himself, calm and composed, in a place that demanded so much more. Ashley headed to the reception desk, her steps quick and decisive. She accessed the reservation system, typing John Cena's name with exaggerated flair. When nothing appeared, she rolled her eyes and returned to the dining area, visibly annoyed. "Well, as I suspected, you don't have a reservation," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We do have a few tables available, but just so you know, this isn't a casual dining spot." Cena remained unbothered, his calm demeanor seemingly irritating her even more. "I'd like to dine here," he replied, his tone unchanged. Ashley let out an exaggerated sigh, grabbing a menu with an abrupt motion. "All right, but I'll need to seat you in a suitable area. Follow me." She began walking briskly through the dining room without bothering to check if he was following. When they reached the farthest, least appealing corner of the restaurant, she dropped the menu on the table with an audible thud. "Here you go. This table is perfect for you," she said, her tone falsely sweet. "If you need anything, let me know, but only if it's necessary, okay?" Cena maintained his slight smile, ignoring her tone. "Thank you. I'm sure this will be an interesting experience." As she walked away, Ashley muttered under her breath, loud enough for a nearby couple to hear. "He won't last 5 minutes here. Bet he'll leave as soon as he opens the menu." Across the dining room, Cena calmly opened the menu, his eyes scanning the options without haste. The live music continued to fill the air, but something about his posture was intriguing. It was as if nothing could disturb his serenity. From the other side of the room, Ashley watched with a smug smile, certain that he would soon ask for the check and disappear. She moved through the dining room with quick, mechanical steps, not even bothering to look at him. Instead of choosing a table in the center where the golden light from the chandeliers illuminated the elegance of the space, she led him to the most hidden, poorly lit corner of the restaurant, a table near the kitchen where the sound of dishes being washed and the muffled chatter of staff created an atmosphere far removed from the rest of the dining room. "Here you go. This table should do," she said, dropping the menu on the table carelessly. "I think you'll feel comfortable here. It's more private." Cena glanced at the table and then at Ashley, his slight smile unwavering. "Thank you," he replied calmly. Ashley crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes as if trying to figure out whether he was being sarcastic or simply clueless. "You're welcome," she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Just so you know, we usually reserve these tables for special cases, but since we don't have anything booked tonight, you can have it." Spinning on her heels, she left before he could respond. When Ashley returned to take Cena's order, her behavior became even more cruel. She pulled out her notepad with an exaggerated motion and cast a cold glance at him. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asked, not bothering to hide the boredom in her voice. "Or would you like a recommendation?" Cena looked at the menu and calmly pointed to one of the most expensive main courses. "I'd like to try this one." Ashley stifled a laugh, covering her mouth with one hand as if trying to hold back a snide comment. "Oh, of course, the filet de Rossini," she said with a condescending tone. "A classic dish. Just to confirm, sir, you do know this costs $350, right?" Cena nodded, his calm demeanor unchanging. "Yes, it sounds wonderful." Ashley tilted her head, her lips curling into a malicious smile. "All right then," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just to make sure there aren't any misunderstandings later, I suggest you double-check the prices. We wouldn't want anyone to have unpleasant surprises." Cena remained unfazed, which seemed to irritate her even more. "I'm certain," he said calmly. Ashley let out a dramatic sigh, as if she were doing him a huge favor, and walked away. In the dim corner of the restaurant, Cena sat alone at the table, his calmness standing in stark contrast to the environment around him. The noise of the kitchen and the hum of conversations from the other patrons faded as he simply enjoyed the moment, his composure remaining untouched by the waitress's cruelty. Across the room, Ashley could feel her annoyance bubbling up, but it only served to make Cena's tranquility all the more apparent. There was something about his quiet demeanor that made the arrogance around him seem even more out of place. As the minutes passed, Ashley couldn't help but watch him, waiting for him to ask for the check. But the longer he sat there, unruffled, the more she felt her own frustration grow. Was he completely unaware of her attempt to belittle him, or did he simply not care? As the evening wore on, Cena continued to enjoy his meal, his presence quietly defying the expectations of everyone around him. He had already shown that he wasn't concerned with appearances or judgment. In a world where so much emphasis was placed on status and wealth, Cena's unassuming nature stood out in a way that no amount of sarcasm or condescension could diminish. The meal went on, and Ashley could feel her earlier certainty fading. What was it that made him so unshakable? John Cena jotted down the order with a firm motion. "Very well, as you wish," Ashley said, her voice laced with a hint of condescension. "But I'll warn you, our chef prefers dishes like this to be enjoyed by those who truly appreciate fine dining. I hope it meets your expectations." She spun on her heels, but before leaving, she stopped, turned back, and added, "Oh, and one more thing. The minimum tip expected here is 20%. Keep that in mind while you enjoy." As Ashley walked away, Cena appeared entirely unaffected by the discomfort she tried to create. He glanced around the dining room, admiring the decor and the pianist's performance. The ambiance of the room seemed to lift his spirits, his calm composure never wavering. When the appetizer arrived, Ashley set the plate down forcefully, causing it to slide slightly across the table. "Here's your appetizer. I hope you enjoy it, or at least know what you're eating," she said with a mocking smile. Cena thanked her politely, his demeanor unchanged. "Thank you." Ashley leaned in slightly, trying to provoke a reaction from him. "You know," she said, lowering her voice in an almost conspiratorial tone, "a lot of customers who order this dish end up not liking it. It's not exactly mainstream, but I think you'll do just fine. Good luck." Cena looked at her with the same calm expression, his smile barely changing. "It looks excellent. Thank you for your attention." Frustrated that she couldn't elicit any negative reaction from him, Ashley walked away quickly, muttering something to a coworker. "That guy won't even make it to the main course," she said. "He's going to ask for the check as soon as he sees the bill." Meanwhile, Cena continued to eat his appetizer leisurely, his focus on the meal unaffected by the treatment he had received. Across the dining room, Ashley watched him from a distance. Her arms were crossed, and a malicious smile spread across her face as she noticed that he seemed distracted. "I bet he's going to ask for tap water," she commented to another staff member, who visibly ignored her, uncomfortable with her behavior. However, the elderly customer at a nearby table continued to observe Cena. He raised his wine glass and silently toasted in Cena's direction. Cena responded with a slight nod and a smile, acknowledging the gesture. Dinner was only just beginning, but Ashley's growing disdain for Cena wasn't going unnoticed. After taking Cena's order, Ashley decided to teach him a lesson, believing he didn't belong in the restaurant. Instead of promptly delivering his order to the kitchen, she made a point of prioritizing the patrons she deemed more important. She stopped to chat with an elegant couple in the center of the dining room, laughed exaggeratedly at a joke told by another guest, and even delivered a cocktail to a table that wasn't hers. Meanwhile, time passed, and Cena continued to wait patiently. In an attempt to provoke him further, Ashley repeatedly walked past his table, pretending to be busy. Every time he glanced in her direction, she averted her eyes and quickened her steps as if she were too occupied to attend to him. After a long wait, Cena was approached by one of the patrons who had been observing Ashley's behavior. The elderly man, with neatly combed white hair and dressed in a navy blue suit, approached with a kind smile. "Good evening, young man. I hope you don't mind me interrupting, but I've noticed that you've been overlooked," he said, his tone polite yet firm. Cena smiled back calmly. "Good evening. Don't worry, it's all fine." The elderly man chuckled softly and leaned in to speak more quietly. "You know, sometimes being treated like this is a test of our patience, but I can say with certainty that maintaining your composure is a great sign of strength." Before Cena could reply, Ashley suddenly appeared, interrupting the conversation. "Sir, can I help you with something?" she asked the elderly man, her voice more polished than usual, but with a subtly authoritative tone. "I wouldn't want you to disturb our customer." The elderly man narrowed his eyes at her, but maintained his composure. "Don't worry, miss. I was just greeting this gentleman here. It's rare to find someone so serene." Ashley let out an exaggerated sigh and gestured toward the man's table. "Well, perhaps you should return to your table and enjoy your dinner," she said, her impatience clear. Cena simply observed, his calm demeanor unwavering. Despite Ashley's attempts to escalate the situation, it was clear that her behavior was not having the desired effect. Instead of the anger or frustration she had expected, she was only met with composure and grace. The elderly man returned to his seat, still watching Cena with admiration. There was something about his presence, quiet, unflinching, that seemed to stir something in the room. It wasn't just a meal he was having. It was a lesson in dignity, patience, and the power of composure in the face of adversity. John Cena's expression remained calm yet analytical as the elderly man finished speaking. "Thank you for coming over," he said, offering a slight nod. "It was a pleasure speaking with you." The elderly man nodded in return and made his way back to his table, but not before casting one final disapproving glance at Ashley, who appeared entirely indifferent. When Ashley finally decided to bring Cena's main course, she made sure to take longer than necessary. First, she stopped in the kitchen to chat with the chefs, leaving the dish sitting under the warming lamp. Then, she returned to the dining room to attend to another table, completely ignoring the ready plate. When she finally brought the dish out, she placed it on Cena's table with a brusque gesture. "Here's your order. I hope you enjoy it," she said, her tone dripping with irony. "Oh, and if you don't like it, please let us know. We can always adjust to something more affordable." Cena thanked her with the same calm demeanor as before. "It looks excellent." "Thank you." Ashley gave a cynical smile and leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough for him to hear. "Are you sure? It's a very sophisticated dish. It might be difficult for someone who's not used to it." "I'm sure," Cena replied serenely. "Thank you for your concern." Frustrated that she couldn't provoke any negative reaction from him, Ashley walked away quickly. At the bar, she commented to a coworker who was unsuccessfully trying to ignore her remarks. "He's pretending to be polite, but it's obvious he's uncomfortable," she said with a laugh, placing an empty glass on the counter. "I bet he doesn't even know what he's eating. It's always the same with these types. They come here to feel important, but end up making fools of themselves." Her coworker forced a smile, visibly uncomfortable. "Maybe he just wants to have dinner, Ashley. Maybe we should treat him like any other customer." Ashley stared at him incredulously. "Like any other customer?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Did you see the boots he's wearing? He doesn't belong here, and frankly, if he can't handle it, he shouldn't have even walked through the door." Meanwhile, the couple who had been observing the scene earlier whispered to each other. "She's awful," the woman said, shaking her head. "He's being so polite, but she keeps trying to humiliate him." "I agree," the man frowned. "It's disgraceful. I think we should say something to the manager." Back at his table, Cena calmly finished his main course. He glanced around, noticing the sympathetic looks from other patrons, but he didn't appear the least bit bothered. When Ashley returned to clear the plate, her expression was still filled with disdain. "So, how was the dish? Did it meet your expectations?" she asked with a fake smile. Cena looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "It was excellent, thank you. Please tell the chefs they did an impeccable job." Ashley raised her eyebrows, surprised that she couldn't provoke any complaints or irritation. As she walked away, she muttered to herself, but loudly enough to be heard, "He might be smiling now, but let's see if he still is when the bill comes." Seated at the table, Cena calmly observed his surroundings, a slight smile on his face. His gaze suggested that the moment to act was drawing ever closer. Ashley, increasingly frustrated by her inability to provoke Cena, decided to escalate her provocations. After serving him the coffee he had requested, she deliberately spoke loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. "You know, it's hard to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in," she said to a colleague, casting a pointed glance in Cena's direction. The colleague, visibly uncomfortable, tried to change the subject, but Ashley continued. "That's why we have a reservations policy," she said, her voice growing more insistent. "It helps us avoid situations like this." Several patrons nearby began paying attention, some frowning, others whispering among themselves. The couple who had been following the situation looked outraged. The woman placed her hand on her chest and murmured, "This is outrageous. She's trying to humiliate the man in public." Ashley, oblivious to the growing discomfort in the room, continued her mission to provoke Cena. However, it was clear that her behavior was no longer going unnoticed. Her attempts to embarrass him were only alienating the rest of the diners, and with each passing moment, she was losing the battle of public perception. Cena remained unfazed, continuing to enjoy his meal and his quiet dignity. His composure stood in stark contrast to Ashley's increasingly erratic and hostile attitude. As the situation unfolded, it became evident that the more Ashley tried to provoke him, the more her own character was exposed for everyone to see. And as for Cena, it seemed his calm resolve and measured response would ultimately be the most powerful statement of all. The elderly man at another table took a sip of his wine, observing the scene with a look of disapproval. He muttered under his breath, "This has gone too far." John Cena, still seated calmly at his table, surveyed the room without a hint of irritation. His serene demeanor seemed to unsettle Ashley even more, as she now felt the eyes of other patrons on her. A well-dressed woman seated 2 tables ahead commented to her companion, "He must be someone important to stay this calm. Anyone else would have left by now." "Or maybe he's just stronger than she realizes," the man replied, casting a curious glance at Cena. Determined to provoke a reaction, Ashley returned to Cena's table to ask if he needed anything else, but her approach was anything but professional. "I hope you're enjoying your experience," she said, with an exaggeratedly sarcastic smile. "After all, it's always interesting to have different kinds of people here. It adds a unique touch to the atmosphere." Cena, fixing her with a steady gaze, finally responded. His voice was calm, but carried weight. "Different? Could you explain what you mean by that?" Ashley let out a short, nervous laugh, trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, our clientele typically has a more traditional profile. It's rare to see someone with your style here." The room fell silent. Nearby diners stopped their conversations, clearly tuning into what was happening. Ashley seemed pleased with the attention she was receiving, believing she had the situation under control. Cena stayed silent for a few moments, holding her gaze. His expression was firm, but devoid of anger. Finally, he spoke. "You're right. Perhaps I should handle this differently." Ashley blinked, confused, but before she could respond, the restaurant manager appeared. A middle-aged man with impeccable posture and an air of authority. He scanned the room and immediately sensed the tense atmosphere. When his eyes landed on Cena, his expression changed drastically. He hurried over to the table, completely ignoring Ashley. "Mr. Bautista!" the manager exclaimed, his tone filled with respect. "I wasn't aware you were visiting us today. Please let me know how I can assist you." Ashley's face turned pale, the blood draining from her as she watched the scene unfold. She glanced at the manager, then at Cena, utterly bewildered. Cena held the manager's gaze for a moment before turning his attention back to Ashley. "Now," he said, his tone calm but commanding, "let's talk about how we treat people." The silence in the room was deafening. All eyes were fixed on Cena's table, waiting to see what would happen next. The manager of Lumiere, a man with an impeccable appearance and a commanding demeanor, was visibly shaken as he took in the situation. Ignoring Ashley entirely, he addressed Cena directly, leaning slightly in a gesture of respect. "Mr. Bautista, I deeply apologize for the delay in recognizing you," he said, his tone filled with deference. "It's an honor to have you with us this evening. Please let me know how I can make your experience more enjoyable." Ashley, who until that moment believed she was in control of the situation, froze. Her mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. "Mr. Bautista? He knows him? What's going on here?" Cena looked at the manager, offering a slight smile. "Thank you, but there's no need to worry. I'm fine. I'd just like to have a brief conversation with your staff, if that's not a problem." The manager's expression immediately grew concerned, sensing that something was amiss. "Of course, Mr. Bautista. Whatever you need," he said, casting a sharp, reproachful glance at Ashley, who stood beside them, pale and visibly uncomfortable. Ashley began to stammer, desperately trying to regain some semblance of control. I didn't know. I thought—" The manager cut her off with firm resolve. "Thought what, Ashley?" "That this customer, who happens to be one of the owners of this restaurant, didn't deserve respect?" Ashley's face was now a deep shade of red, her earlier smugness replaced with panic. She stood frozen, unable to respond, as the manager turned back to Cena. Cena's voice, calm yet authoritative, echoed in the now still room. "I don't think anyone should be treated differently based on their appearance. Respect is earned, not assumed. It's important that everyone, regardless of who they are, is treated with dignity." Ashley's discomfort only deepened as the weight of Cena's words settled over her. The manager nodded, acknowledging the truth in Cena's statement. "I understand, Mr. Bautista. he said, his voice steady. "I'll be addressing this with the staff immediately. I'm deeply sorry for this situation." Ashley, humiliated and shaken, stood silently, unable to find the words. As the room returned to its usual hum, the once ambitious attempts to undermine Cena had backfired, leaving her exposed for all to see. Meanwhile, Cena sat there, calm and composed, his quiet strength the only thing that remained untouched by the chaos that had surrounded him. With the same respect as anyone else, John Cena's voice was low, but carried a severity that drained the remaining color from Ashley's face. She struggled to justify herself. He didn't say who he was, and he looked. She trailed off, realizing that anything she said would only worsen her situation. Cena finally broke the silence. His voice, calm but carrying a weight that resonated across the room, made everyone listen closely. "There's no need to state who I am to be treated with dignity," he said. "Frankly, it shouldn't matter. Everyone who walks through these doors, regardless of their appearance, should be welcomed with respect." The entire dining room was riveted. Many patrons murmured among themselves, stunned by the revelation that Cena was one of the restaurant's owners. The couple who had been observing the interaction appeared pleased, and the elderly man nodded discreetly in approval. Nearby tables buzzed with hushed conversation. A man seated with his wife whispered, "I knew there was something different about him. He has a presence that's impossible to ignore." The woman nodded. "Look at how he's handling it. Such grace. I hope she learned something from this." Other diners whispered among themselves, some clearly ashamed for not intervening earlier. The atmosphere in the dining room was tense, but there was a palpable sense of anticipation. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. The manager turned to Ashley again, his expression a mix of frustration and restraint. "Ashley, I expect a detailed explanation of your behavior after your shift. For now, please leave this table and stay away from it. I'll take over from here." Ashley opened her mouth to protest, but the manager's resolute gaze silenced her. Cena took a deep breath and stood up. He glanced around the room, noticing that all eyes were fixed on him. With a calm tone imbued with authority, he began to speak. This restaurant was founded with the idea of being a place where everyone could feel welcome, no matter how they dress or where they come from. Unfortunately, that was not the case today. But I believe we can learn from this. The diners remained silent, absorbing his words. The manager appeared both uneasy and admiring of the way Cena was handling the situation. Cena turned to the manager and concluded, "I'd like to meet with the entire team after the dining room closes. There are some important things we need to discuss." The manager nodded immediately. "It will be done, Mr. Bautista. Once again, I apologize for everything." Cena returned to his seat, and the dining room slowly began to return to normal. Though the patrons continued to whisper about what they had just witnessed, the tension had eased and the air had shifted. As the last of the diners left, the empty Lumiere dining room was silent. The staff stood gathered, and Cena remained at the center, his presence commanding the space. He looked around, his eyes meeting each person's, conveying a profound calm, but also unwavering resolve. "We all make mistakes," he began, his voice steady and resonant, "but what truly matters is what we do after those mistakes. Today, we witnessed a problem that goes far beyond poor service. We saw the impact of snap judgments, hidden biases, and a lack of empathy. But I want you to understand, this is not a condemnation, it's an opportunity." Cena paused, letting his words settle. His gaze lingered on Ashley, who sat at the back, her eyes filled with tears and shame. "Ashley," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "I know what happened today was a mistake, and mistakes can be corrected as long as there's effort and a willingness to learn. What you choose to do next will define who you are." Cena turned to the rest of the team, his voice softening but retaining its purpose. In the world we live in, it's all too easy to judge people based on what we see on the surface, their clothes, their appearance, what they drive, or where they live. But I want you to consider something. What happens when you choose to look deeper, to see beyond the surface? The room was quiet as the staff absorbed his words. Cena's presence, calm and grounded, filled the space with a sense of purpose. Every person who walks through those doors, he continued, deserves our respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from. We cannot judge someone based on the way they look, the way they dress, or the life they lead. We must always remember that we are here to serve others, not just with our hands, but with our hearts. He paused again, letting the weight of his message sink in. The staff was silent, each person reflecting on the truth of his words. Cena's voice softened, but his resolve remained strong. I want you all to take this moment as a lesson not just in service, but in kindness, empathy, and respect. Let today be the day we all commit to doing better, to treating every single person who walks through this door with the dignity they deserve. The room remained still, and the staff stood in thoughtful silence. As Cena finished speaking, he knew that the lesson of the evening had already begun to take root. The restaurant might have faltered, but it was now poised to grow stronger, better, and more compassionate than ever before. John Cena stepped forward, placing his hands in his pockets, his tone becoming more reflective. We all carry struggles that no one else can see, he began. The person who seems out of place might be having the worst day of their life. The one who doesn't dress as expected might have achieved more than you could imagine. The kindness we choose to extend, especially to those who seem undeserving, might just be the gesture that changes everything. The staff remained silent, absorbing his words. Some appeared visibly moved, while others stared at the floor, clearly reflecting on their own actions. Ashley finally lifted her head, wiping away her tears. Her voice was quiet, but laden with remorse. I never thought about it that way before, she admitted. I was so focused on the restaurant's image, on maintaining standards, that I forgot what really matters. I forgot that every person has value, no matter who they are or what they look like. She paused for a moment, looking directly at Cena. I promise, Mr. Bautista, I'll change. Cena nodded, offering her a small, encouraging smile. That promise is to yourself, Ashley, not to me. True change comes from within, and if you need help along the way, I'll be here. Ashley nodded vigorously, a mix of relief and determination washing over her. Kindness isn't about grand gestures, Cena continued, his voice calm and sure. It's about the small choices we make every day. It's about treating everyone we encounter as if they matter, because they do. And that is what defines the character of a place and of a person. The staff stood still, taking in his words. They could feel the weight of the lesson in the air, a lesson that was both humbling and empowering. Oh, Mr. Bautista, your message was clear, the manager said, his voice full of sincerity. We'll work to ensure that Lumiere reflects exactly what you envisioned. Thank you for reminding us of that. Cena simply nodded, offering a serene smile as he stepped out of the restaurant. The streets of Beverly Hills sparkled under the city lights, and Cena paused briefly on the sidewalk, gazing at Lumiere's entrance. His soft smile returned as he reflected on the events of the evening. What had transpired wasn't just about a restaurant or a mistreated customer. It was about the importance of creating spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Cena knew that even in the most challenging situations, there was an opportunity to inspire and transform. As he walked down the illuminated streets, he thought about what he had said, but also about the message he hoped others would take from that night. If he could leave everyone who heard the story with one thought, it would be this: in a world where you can be anything, choose to be kind. True strength lies not in judgment, but in acceptance. And above all, remember, it's in the small choices we make every day that we shape not only the world around us, but also who we are as human beings. As he continued on his way, the lessons of the evening lingered in his mind, and he hoped that his actions had made a lasting impact on those around him. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.